Lisa Kelly works for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Jim.
So I haven't seen you in a long time.
No, that's very true.
So we're recording this on November 3rd. Okay, follow along carefully.
All right.
Does the date November 4th, 2006 mean anything to you?
Gosh, can I even remember back that long? No,
So
it
that's the
doesn't.
last time I saw you. That's the last time we were in the same room together. It was a communique reunion.
Yes.
And I have pictures.
Oh,
So do you remember that night?
yes, I do remember that night.
I don't. So that's the difference between you and me right away. It's just going to be a lot of tension. So what do you do at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce?
Well, I'm a programs manager, so I manage programs, pretty basic. But I work in particular on a program called the Discoverability Network.
Right.
And it connects businesses in our chamber. We represent 60,000 businesses, 155 local chambers of commerce and boards of trade. And we connect them to people with disabilities to fulfill labor market needs.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that later. So I'm kind of interested just how you got there. So I'm going to go
Yep.
hit
Back.
the rewind button. So Communicate is where we met. And how would you even describe what that company was? It's a live event company.
I was
And a
thought
marketing
more,
company,
Yeah,
or-
corporate communications,
Corporate
I thought.
communications
Yeah,
is
that
nice,
would be
general.
Yeah, and we kind of did a bit of everything, didn't we?
And you were account manager.
I was an account manager.
And that was a long time ago. And that was actually my last full-time job, believe it or not.
I think it was mine too.
So, but you...
No, I went after that to PJ Spratt,
Okay.
which was a consulting firm, an educational consulting firm.
Okay. And then I remember the last time I was really paid attention to you, which is a long time ago, but you were at Co-ed Communications and you were a partner there, right?
Yes.
For a
Yes,
but a long time.
for like 25 years.
25 years longer than I thought. So,
Yeah.
and I know your former partner, I guess. Tell me tell me what Co-ed did.
Sure. So it was with David Ben, another communique
Yes.
semi-alumni.
Yes.
And we started a company that basically created curriculum for grades K to 12 that was funded independently, coming up with new, ways to present materials. So if you think about it, it might take somebody 4 years to write a textbook in the school system.
Right.
We could turn something around in 6 months to a year.
So if I recall the idea there, but you got corporate sponsors.
Corporate and nonprofit. So
Right.
one of our biggest clients was the Canada's History Society.
Right.
And we did a Governor General's Award for teaching history.
Okay.
We did a lot of work with the Olympics, the Olympic Committee, on Olympic educational values. Unilever was a big one on ecological footprinting. We had some financial literacy pieces, so all over.
So you had a good thing going.
I did.
So why did you leave? Or why did that end? Did you guys have a big fight or something?
No.
I can't believe that because I know.
No, David, nobody could argue with David on this planet. Like, David's the most
I
wonderful
don't think
guy.
he's ever been in a bad mood.
No, he is not. Well, he has
Well, you
after hitting the
probably see-
links.
after
Yeah,
25 after
hitting the links and
after
maybe having
golfing.
a bad game. But I moved to England. I followed my husband, trailing spouse, to England,
Oh, okay.
and I worked remotely. But it kind of changed the way we did business, and it was just at the beginning of the internet, which is so long ago.
That's
when you
really
think about
remote,
it, I know it really is.
Right.
I was dialing up, to contact him back in Canada. But I'd fly back and forth. But our business model started to change. And more we had people saying, the sponsors saying, we want to do digital products. And I'm kind of still a firm believer that that's not actually how people learn. It's very hard to actually have a truly interactive experience just interacting with a computer. I think COVID's shown that to us all.
Right.
And certainly we didn't have the technology or the depth of tools that we have now. And I hated it. I hated, taking these amazing programs and just trying to create a website that a kid's going to go look at.
Right.
You don't learn that way. So,
And that was early, as you say, early internet, so early.
yeah.
web. So you're limited in some ways.
Yeah,
at
we
the time,
struggled
I
through
guess.
that a bit. And I also think now you'd be competing against like huge purveyors of content that we could never as a small company have competed against.
Right.
So slowly, weaned myself off that and then decided to go back, followed my husband to America. We
Right.
continued, but when I came back to Canada, I decided to recreate myself
Okay.
and went back to college.
So I've noticed that you've gone back
A lot.
several times. So you okay? So you came back to Canada, and you've been back to school. You went to George Brown College
Yep.
and got a diploma in career and work counseling.
Yep.
And then what's the Vocational Rehabilitation Association? You went there.
So
as well?
yeah, that's a organization that's helping people return to the workplace.
Right.
So I worked with people on Ontario Works, and so people on what would have been formerly called welfare for some of our audience if you're older. And I worked with people who had been injured on the job and had to transition to a brand new career. So WSIB clients.
So Lisa has held positions in with Canadian Business Sensibility,
Yeah, that was a great job.
Ontario Disability Network Canada,
Yep.
and Rehabilitation Network Canada. I'm detecting a theme here. There's a lot of word ability or disability pops up a lot.
That's right.
So I guess that sort of leads up to where you are now. So you've gone back to school quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just to sharpen your skill set, I guess, and to learn.
Yeah. So I think, there's the whole imposter syndrome. I think a lot of women have that. I think a lot of people that have barriers have that. So
Okay.
I do have a disability. I've had it for over 40 years, but never really spoke about it. And
So it's an invisible disability.
it is an invisible disability. So when I went back to become a career counselor, I just ended up by happenstance working with people with disabilities. And, as I was coaching them and helping them to find work, transition to new things that they might need to do, I started thinking, well, why am I not being authentic about my own experiences? So I think it took about 5 years before I actually disclosed that I had a disability. And it helped me connect to people. And it also, I think, at my age, I'm relatively successful. If I can't talk about this, who's going to?
Right. So what is your disability then?
Oh, what a rude question.
Is it?
Yes. So you would say,
What's the
Lisa,
correct way?
yeah. Well, I think it's like anything. And you just say, Lisa, what's your experience with disability or of disability?
So it's all about language.
It is. I actually train a lot about language.
Yes, and before you answer that question, I know you're trying to avoid it, but
No, I'm not. Actually,
know.
I have a mental health disability.
Okay.
And post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. And I also have now age-related back issues. Okay. But that's not a primary disability, and I don't really think of it as one.
Because it's when you get into all the corporate lingo, I do need an interpreter sometimes. So,
yeah.
But so I'm looking at all your qualifications online. It's like there's lived experience, or Lisa has
experiential knowledge.
That's the other one. Lisa has experiential knowledge of disability, which is corporate speak for you. You have a
no, it's a little bit more.
You've lived with with a disability.
And actually, a friend of mine, Elizabeth Moeller, she's the one. We're going to actually be teaching a course together at George Brown. We've been asked to create a certificate program for disability in the workplace. So Elizabeth and I were talking, and so you can have lived experience of a disability, but it doesn't mean anything other than I've lived with this. It doesn't mean that you know how to coach or you have professional skills or you have an educational background in it. So experiential knowledge would be not only have I lived it, I have training in it, and I've worked in that field. So it's a lot more in depth. So I often get people with disabilities coming up and saying, can I work with you? And it's like, yes, but you're not a trainer in this, or you don't have a background in employment. So it's kind of trying to split the knowledge base of the two. So one is completely valid lived experience. The other is indicating that there's some educational and work experience that backs that up as well.
So you're at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. But so why would any person or business join a Chamber of Commerce? In my mind, it's for networking and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So you're an extra layer. You're a resource within the Chamber of Commerce.
So the Chamber basically creates tools or policy papers that reflect what the businesses out there in Ontario are telling us.
Right.
But sometimes we create tools or programs to help address them. So we have a big trade program, right? But we also create tools. So we just launched, for instance, a mental health toolkit. We're doing a whole series on climate right now and how that affects.
These are services
for small business to help them flourish.
To help the membership.
Yep. And so what came up is about 5 years ago when I was with Sensibility, Louis De Palma, he often says we fought the first time we met. We did not, if anybody's wondering, though we did have some charged discussions. Louis hired me to write the content for a website that they were creating and for people with disabilities and talking to business. So the whole idea was businesses in Ontario have a labor market shortage. Can't find people to work, especially in smaller communities. So people with disabilities are underrepresented or, underemployed or unemployed. So what about if we took people with disabilities who want to work and can't find it and connect it to businesses looking? And that just seemed like such a simple match. So the Chamber created a tool. It's a job matching platform, kind of like a non-searchable LinkedIn, where people with disabilities can safely disclose and be connected to businesses that are going, yeah, I think you having a disability is okay. In fact, I see benefit to it. And there's a whole bunch of things I could bore you with, and if you went on and looked, but people with disabilities are actively as or more productive, have as good of or better attendance, work more safely, improve the overall culture. And to me, the really interesting piece is they drive innovation. They think of things differently.
Is it even legal to ask the question I asked you in a job interview? No. You can't even ask someone if they're married in a job interview.
Yeah,
right?
That's all
Or their
protected
sexual
information.
orientation
Exactly,
or
no.
anything, right?
But what you could ask is, can you tell me how you're able to do the job? So you still need to be able to, do a job. So you might ask someone, do you require an accommodation to do this job? Which is basically signaling that somebody has a disability and they might need changes. So when I used to work at Communicate with You years ago, I actually found it quite overwhelming at times. And I don't know if you remember. I can remember quite a few times when I was doing a show. Now, we didn't do shows on site. We used to do these live events. But being quite overwhelmed and crawling into a washroom at 2 a.m. and crying under the sinks while I tried to get, I was so overwhelmed.
Just the pressure of the event.
Yeah, the pressure.
Because it's tomorrow.
Exactly, the noise, everybody talking to you. And now at the office, I'm also in an open concept. It's also a lot of pressure, but noise canceling headsets changed my life.
Right.
My God, just to be able to filter out some of the world around me. And it's so simple. It's like, I don't know, $100 to buy a good pair, but it changes your world. Or even being able to take regular breaks for me is really important because I do get overwhelmed by stimuli. So just knowing some of those things, and I think if you'd asked me, Jim, when we worked together, I wouldn't have even said I had a disability. I knew that I had severe depression. I knew that I was treated for that, but I wouldn't have recognized that as a disability.
I guess it was almost like before times. I mean, I'm, that NHL stuff, the sexual abuse, and then I'm hearing some of the people making excuses in these interviews, like, well, it was 2010. That was a different time. No, it was only 10 years ago, and there was scandals in U.S. college football that were, and I had to look it up, and I go, well, that was 9 years ago. Yep. And it was still, it was unacceptable, and it's just it's the culture of that, it's that workplace culture that it gradually changes.
And we were in a culture that's, it was definitely youth oriented and busy, but I also think it wasn't a place that I don't think I wouldn't have felt comfortable at Communicate disclosing because I think it would have limited my career prospects.
Well, everyone was young. It was probably your first big job, right?
Yeah, it was
most
huge.
People's first big
and,
job.
We had tremendous. We were given I remember launching a car out in BC, and we were given $1 million to spend in an afternoon. So a lot of responsibilities. So you're not going to go to someone and say, hey, by the way, I struggle with, or, it just wouldn't have occurred to me.
People just want the job done.
And as well, I think that it's changed, particularly the piece around mental health, is it's less stigmatized and it's talked about more. And even one of the biggest things I find when I train people about disability is a lot of people still don't consider mental health conditions a disability or addictions or mental, or PTSD. It's just no, that's not a disability. And it's yes, it is actually.
And if you do the research, which I have not done, but it's an enormous, high percentage of people
20% of Canadians will be diagnosed with a mental health condition in any given year.
Right.
So that's a diagnosis. That's not like I'm sad. That's actually a medical diagnosis with,
clinically depressed.
Yeah.
I mean.
And then, I think during COVID that's much higher.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the other thing that's interesting is almost anyone who has a disability also has a mental health component to it because it's isolating and there's so many barriers. So if you added that in, I think actually the number of people that might self-identify with a disability, which is 22% of Canadians, is actually probably much higher.
So do you give lots of presentations with lots of
numbers?
Lots of pie charts and
well, I actually prefer to tell stories, to tell you
Yes.
the truth, because I think people don't remember what grade you got in grade 12, but they remember stories. And that's what you're doing here, right? People remember stories. So I actually have tried to bring people with disabilities on to tell their stories and how that can work, because those things tend to stick more.
So I did see a video that you were in. And so my next 3 questions are going to be questions that you asked in that video.
Okay. Oh, boy.
So it's only fair, I figure. So what are some of the challenges you've faced with your disability, and how has that changed your outlook in life?
Oh, that's a mean one.
That's because you said it, and you're a mean person, apparently.
That's true. So what are some of the challenges? So I think, first of all, stigma. That would be the big one. Either fear of telling people, so not asking for what you need, or an inability to share the reality, the authenticity of what you're experiencing to be able to get to what you need. Oh, that's probably the biggest one. And then just coming to terms with it myself, because it is stigmatized. So embracing that, owning it, talking about it, being comfortable with it.
So is a lot of it in your own, you're just fighting your own demons?
Yeah, constantly.
You're worried about, I mean, I would never have thought anything of you at the back in the day. So, but obviously you're very aware and you're trying to navigate your work life, I guess, without.
Yeah, work life, personal life. I mean, it's hard to strip that out, right?
Right. Especially back then, because a lot of your friends are people you meet at work, especially.
Yeah, and just the comments you hear sometimes, like it's like you're not going to say anything if people are making comments about mental health. Yeah, so you're not going to do that. And I think for me, being account manager was a really great job. I learned a ton, but what a bad fit.
It's a high pressure.
Yeah, just
with
too much
it's
pressure.
It's a lot of deadlines, and
it's not even the deadlines. So for me, deadlines aren't pressure. Isn't really
high stakes deadlines.
It's more the absolute cacophony of voices coming around you. So you've got your boss saying one thing, clients saying another, your team saying another, and just having it all hit you at the same time. So that was the difficult part for me, not the on-site stuff. I love the preparation. I love the sales. I loved, the organization. I loved the deadlines. It was the actual on-site that probably wasn't a good fit for me.
So question number 2 from you. What do you think is the biggest barrier you've faced in terms of finding a job, and has your disability affected that?
So to be honest, I've never had a great deal of difficulty finding a job. I have found limitations more to do with gender than disability. So, in terms of gender identity and just diversity, which is why I've been taking diversity courses lately, because I think there's that intersectionality that nobody talks about. So being a female with a disability has probably been more difficult than being a person with a disability or being a female. Does that make sense?
Sure. I'll get a transcript of this later and try to parse that. But for now, yes, I get it. Question number 3. What is your overall message to encourage job seekers with disabilities?
So I think it's about telling stories. I think it's for any job seeker. You tell a story, right? We always start with resumes. I don't know why it bothers me in our profession. What's your resume? What do you do?
Right.
But I actually think we're telling stories, the story of us and what we want in our professional life. So it's not a personal story, it's a work story. If you focus on the story, what you put in the resume naturally flows out of that. What you're going to say in an interview is a natural extension. You're telling your story. So my story is someone who cares deeply with experiential knowledge of disability in helping people find work, connecting to employers, to job seekers. So it's about helping businesses tell better stories about themselves. We're open to everyone, and helping job seekers tell better stories about themselves. I don't believe disability itself makes a good story. I think ability makes a good story, and I just happen to have a disability.
This is a weird question. Did you need to to get your current position? They already knew who you were probably at this point. So it's not like, did you need to be disabled to get your current job, which is a weird question.
No, it isn't. Because I do tend to hire people with disabilities to work on my team now.
Right.
So no, I did not. And actually, when they first hired me to work when I worked at Sensibility, nobody knew I had a disability. I still hadn't disclosed. So they hired me to write because they knew that I worked in this field, had trained people, and had an educational background in it. I really just started disclosing once I came to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce.
There's Canadian legislation that oversees this sort of thing, the Employment Equity Act, which requires big companies or any company to report on their diversity. Is that?
Yeah, it's a federal legislation though, so only federally regulated companies need to report, and so that would be banks, telecoms, telcos, transportation. Yeah.
Okay. So what's left after that then for you to
small business?
All the so mainly small businesses.
90% of
So everybody.
Yeah, 90% of people are employed by small businesses across Canada.
So a typical small business would be just focused on their own business, selling, producing, whatever they're doing, and going out and sell again, right?
Yep.
So they're not even paying attention to any of this.
No, they aren't. Well, I think small businessmen are some of the smartest and most... I ran my own small business for 25 years, as we talked about, right? So you're a master of everything.
Right.
Or,
Sales,
pretty good at everything. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. So you are focused on that. So we've stepped in. We give tools, free training, free tools, free connecting to the individuals. Because we get that a lot of small businesses, for instance, might not have a human resources department to even deal with some of this.
You were about to say master. So jack of all trades,
of all trades, master of none.
You can't. I don't think you can use the word master anymore, can you?
I don't know. Can I not?
Like master bedroom in real estate, you can't.
Oh, yeah.
There's...
Okay.
Come on, Lisa.
I'm not up on all my diversity language, just disability.
Anyway, I ran into a whole hornet's nest with that about a few months ago.
You know what?
That just happened, right?
But language is so interesting and it's tricky, right? We all want to avoid it because it is changing. It's constantly evolving. But it does express our beliefs, right?
Yes.
And so
it's fascinating.
It's
fascinating, yes.
Like I think even I give a whole training on language. I did a session with KPMG. For International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and they had 2,500 people on the call. And it was all about language. And do you say disability? It's got a DIS. A lot of people uncomfortable with that, right? Do we say diverse abilities, handy capable? There's all these euphemisms we torture ourselves with instead of just saying disability. I also think that we need to... So I like the intentional use of language in examining. So I'm going to be thinking about that master now because you've told me that.
It's everywhere.
I know. No, it's true.
It's everywhere.
So you start rethinking what you're saying and what you're communicating when you actually say those things. So I don't like euphemisms. So like handy capable. What does that mean? I have diverse abilities. What does that mean? I mean, seriously.
It's gibberish at a certain
point. It is. It is. It becomes those corporate slogans, corporate diff abilities. I mean, geez, torturous.
So how do you see your role? Are you trying to change the narrative or what's your overall purpose when I come to work every day?
Or just like doing things. So I can't say I have some grand plan. My boss, Louis De Palma, does. We want to do systems change. Because I think the system's broken. So if we look at the way that people with disabilities, the unemployment rate hasn't changed, remains stubbornly low. So what we've been doing in the past, this one-by-one charity model, hire me, I've got a disability, I need it, feel bad for me, it doesn't work. Because businesses are there to make money and they're struggling to make money. So we really need to teach people to see the values that they bring to a job, and we need to teach businesses that people can bring different values to a job in a different way, but still get the job done.
So, do you have advice for people who might be having trouble finding work?
Yeah. So most jobs are found through networking. We always talk about this 80% hidden job market. It's really true. For people with so that's for everyone. For people with disabilities, get to know your story. It needs to be authentic.
Okay.
And then learn to frame it in a way that is positive. So I'll give you an example. I worked with this really great young man. He's neurodiverse, so meaning usually that means he either has ADHD or autism.
Okay, I've never heard that phrase before.
Yeah, it's a new term
Right.
to kind of cover learning disabilities, ADHD, attention deficit disorder, and also autism.
I'm just here to be educated.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
great.
Sorry, I know this is so down in the weeds. Anyway, so he is neurodiverse, and he was having trouble keeping a job. He was in college. And we got the opportunity to work together. And I don't even know how much he knew some of the changes that he needed to the workplace, but he explained to me that he sees the world differently than other people because he uses words and pictures. What a great story for a graphic designer. Now it's not about the disability or what I do differently. It's my disability that's a central part of me allows me to understand the power of words and graphic images. And we took that to an employer and they ended up hiring him. He just let his work speak for itself. He actually showed his thought process. We didn't have this long interview about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, tell me about yourself, because that's not his strength. Oral words, verbal words are not his strength. He got the job. He was just Employee of the Year this year. I mean, it changed his life, I think, changed the company's perspective on what, not everybody has to look the same, be the same, talk the same, go to the same schools. People can bring different strengths.
If people need help or advice, where do you recommend they look? Or what do you recommend they do?
Well, if you have a disability, every Thursday at 1:00 on Eventbrite, you can look up discoverability or OCC, and we have honest conversations about these topics. So resumes, informational interviews, how to construct a story, how to disclose. That's a big piece, right? How do you tell someone you have a disability, and should you? And if you do, what do you say, and how do you say it, and when do you say it? I mean, just think about all that. How do you figure out what you actually do differently? So we talked about, for me, how this kind of evolved. I didn't know when I was in my 20s what I needed. I really didn't. I had no idea that, hey, in my corner of the office, you guys are in the quiet part, the other office, noise-canceling headsets would have made me so much happier. Maybe more breaks when I went on site to just say, everybody, take off for 10 minutes, let's come back. Those are such simple things, and they would have made such a difference to, the happiness and the fulfillment I felt in my job. So I think people figuring out what do I do differently and how do I ask for it can be life-changing. So you can ask a career counselor, an accessibility specialist. There's a great online resource called SOAR, SOAR, and it's called the Searchable Online Accommodations Resource. And you can search by disability, and it will tell you what are common accommodations, which is it's very cool. So figuring out what you need and then constructing a story that shows it as an asset versus a deficit.
So if people want to get in touch with you, assuming you want people to get in touch with you, how do they reach you?
So we have a website.
Right.
So you can go on there and you can sign up. And mostly everything that I've said today would be available free of charge on the website. So it's www.discoverability.network.
So Lisa, thanks for coming.
Thank you. I don't know how helpful, but it's always great to catch up with a friend.
Well, thank you.